Tariffs, Tectonics, and the tyranny of timing. Donald Trump's trade revival collides with constitutional law, congressional nerves, and the arithmetic of midterm politics. In American politics, timing is often more decisive than ideology. Policies that seem formidable in abstraction can become fragile when they meet an electoral calendar. This is now the predicament of Donald Trump's revived tariff regime. Conceived as a muscular reassertion of presidential authority and economic nationalism, it has instead become entangled in judicial rebuke, legislative resistance, and the slow, grinding machinery of trade law. As the midterm elections approach, the president's trade agenda is discovering that sovereignty, like gravity, is strongest when it is resisted. What began as an attempt to resurrect the unilateralism of Trump's first term has turned into a procedural maze. The Supreme Court's recent invalidation of his use of emergency powers to impose sweeping tariffs has stripped away the legal shortcut on which his strategy relied. In its place stands a patchwork of slower, weaker, and politically hazardous tools. The White House is now racing not against foreign competitors, but against time itself. The result is a collision between executive ambition and constitutional restraint, between populist spectacle and administrative reality, and, most perilously, between tariff politics and the anxieties of swing district voters facing higher prices. In America's peculiar political economy, protectionism is easiest when no one must vote on it. The resurrection of an old faith, Trump's faith in tariffs, is neither tactical nor temporary. It is theological. From his earliest days as a New York property developer to his first presidential campaign, he has treated trade deficits as moral failings and tariffs as instruments of redemption. Where orthodox economists see supply chains, he sees scorecards. Where diplomats see alliances, he sees leverage. During his first presidency, this worldview translated into the most aggressive protectionist experiment since the 1930s. China was confronted, allies were coerced, and institutions were bypassed. The World Trade Organization was marginalized. Domestic manufacturers were promised rebirth. Consumers were told that foreign exporters would foot the bill. The reality was less heroic. American importers and households paid tariffs. Retaliation harmed farmers and exporters. Supply chains adjusted rather than retreated. But politically, the spectacle worked. Trump appeared decisive. Bureaucrats were sidelined. Congress was passive. This template is now being reassembled. Trump's second-term trade policy has sought to revive the image of the omnipotent tariff wielder. Yet the institutional environment has changed. Courts are less deferential. Congress is more anxious. Inflation is no longer theoretical. And the electorate is no longer surprised. The old magic no longer works as effortlessly. Emergency powers and their undoing. At the center of Trump's recent strategy lay an obscure statute, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977. Designed to allow presidents to respond to extraordinary threats, terrorism, rogue states, financial warfare, it had never been used as a general-purpose trade weapon. That novelty was its attraction. By invoking IEEPA, Trump could impose tariffs instantly, without congressional consent or prolonged investigation. The law transformed trade policy into executive proclamation. It turned economic diplomacy into a personal instrument, for a year. This mechanism functioned as intended. Tariffs were raised, adjusted, and threatened in real time. Negotiations were conducted under permanent menace. Markets learned to monitor presidential social media accounts alongside central bank announcements, but the legal foundations were fragile. Laws written for emergencies are not designed for industrial strategy. Eventually, litigation caught up. The Supreme Court's ruling that IEEPA cannot be used for broad tariff policy represents more than a technical defeat. It is a constitutional rebuke. The justices signaled that economic nationalism does not suspend statutory boundaries. In effect, they restored friction to trade policy, the return of procedure. With IEEPA dismantled, Trump has been forced back into the legal architecture he once scorned. This architecture is elaborate, slow, and politically intrusive. The first substitute is Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974. It allows temporary tariffs, up to 15%, for 150 days to address balance of payments problems. Trump has invoked it to impose a 10% global levy, exempting compliant Canadian and Mexican goods, but Section 122 is a stopgap. After 5 months, Congress must approve any extension. The clock is now ticking. The second instrument is Section 301, which permits retaliatory tariffs after investigations into unfair trade practices. This was Trump's main weapon against China in his first term. It is legally robust, but administratively cumbersome. Investigations take months. Public consultations invite lobbying. Courts invite appeals. The third is Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, which allows tariffs on national security grounds. It underpins existing levies on steel, aluminum, and vehicles. These measures remain intact and may be expanded. Collectively, these tools are formidable. Individually, they are constrained. None offers the instantaneous dominance of IEEPA. The president has exchanged a sword for a set of tools. He is discovering that tools require patience. Congress rediscovers its nerves. Trade policy in America has long been characterized by legislative abdication. Since the 1970s, Congress has steadily delegated authority to the executive in exchange for plausible deniability. Presidents make deals, legislators complain. Trump disrupted this equilibrium by pushing delegation to its limit. IEEPA turned delegation into irrelevance. The court's ruling has restored Congress's relevance, whether it wants it or not. Already, signs of unease are visible. 6 Republican representatives recently joined Democrats in curbing tariff powers. Similar resolutions have been passed by the Senate in previous years. What was once ideological loyalty is becoming electoral prudence. Few lawmakers relish voting for higher consumer prices. Fewer still wish to explain them during campaigns. As Kevin Brady, former chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, observed, legislators are unlikely to embrace tariffs imposed on their own constituents. The economics are awkward, the optics are worse. House Speaker Mike Johnson has adopted cautious ambiguity, promising coordination without commitment. This is the language of institutional self-preservation. Congress is not revolting. It is hedging. The midterm constraint. Midterm elections are America's constitutional reminder that power is temporary. They tend to punish incumbents, reward discontent, and magnify economic anxieties. In 2026, inflation remains politically radioactive. Although headline numbers have moderated, price sensitivity endures. Housing, energy, and food costs dominate voter perceptions. In such an environment, tariffs are combustible. Economists agree that tariffs function as consumption taxes. They raise prices. They distort supply chains. They redistribute costs regressively. In Trump's first term, this reality was masked by low inflation and pandemic-era stimulus. In his second, it is exposed. Republican candidates in marginal districts face a dilemma. To oppose tariffs risks alienating the party base. Supporting those risks alienating everyone else. This is not ideological conflict. It is arithmetic, negotiating without leverage. Supporters of Trump's tariff strategy argue that legal setbacks weaken America's bargaining power. Wilbur Ross, who served as Commerce Secretary in Trump's first term, has lamented the loss of executive flexibility. There is truth in this. Instant tariffs are more frightening than potential ones. Delayed punishment invites calculation. Legal review encourages resistance. Foreign governments now understand that American trade threats are conditional. They depend on investigations, votes, and lawsuits. The element of surprise is gone, but this loss is double-edged. Unchecked power breeds recklessness. Proceduralism encourages coherence. The old system allowed Trump to improvise. The new one forces strategy. Whether this is progress depends on one's view of improvisation. The lobbyist's renaissance. Where law proliferates, lobbyists thrive. The return to statutory tariffs has reopened the gates of Washington's influence industry. Section 301 investigations require public submissions. Section 232 reviews invite testimony. Section 122 extensions require congressional persuasion. Each stage creates opportunities for corporate intervention. Companies are already mobilizing. Industries seek exemptions. Importers plead hardship. Exporters warn of retaliation. Foreign governments, too, are intensifying their presence. Embassies, trade missions, and consulting firms are coordinating campaigns. Trade policy is reverting to its natural habitat, bureaucratic theater, for Trump, who prefers spectacle to process. This is an unfamiliar environment. The refund question, the most legally complex consequence of the court's ruling, concerns the $130 billion collected under the invalidated tariffs. More than 1,000 companies have filed refund claims. The court declined to specify procedures. Lower courts must now decide eligibility, timelines, and standards. This uncertainty threatens years of litigation. Trump himself has predicted half a decade of legal battles. From the administration's perspective, refunds are politically inconvenient. Paying them admits error. Withholding them invites lawsuits. Delaying them satisfies no one. For businesses, the issue is existential. Tariffs paid under duress have distorted balance sheets. Unresolved claims impede investment. Legal ambiguity has become an economic variable. Allies, agreements, and the residue of cooperation. Not all of Trump's trade architecture is collapsing. Section 232 tariffs, especially on automobiles, underpin a network of bilateral arrangements with the European Union, Japan, and South Korea. These agreements remain intact. Because they are unaffected by the IEEPA ruling, partner governments are likely to maintain them. This reflects a paradox. Trump's most durable trade achievements are those embedded in institutional compromise rather than personal decree. Even his protectionism requires cooperation, the ideology of control. At its core, Trump's tariff strategy reflects a deeper ideological impulse, the desire to centralize economic control in the presidency. Tariffs are attractive not only because they promise industrial revival, but because they concentrate authority. They bypass regulators. They marginalize legislators. They dramatize leadership. In this sense, the Supreme Court's ruling is not merely legal. It is philosophical. It reasserts pluralism against personalism. The American state, it reminds presidents, is not a private instrument. The administrative burden, trade policy conducted through investigations and committees, imposes heavy bureaucratic costs. Agencies must gather data, evaluate claims, respond to comments, and defend decisions. During Trump's first term, such processes were often rushed or politicized. Courts tolerated some improvisation. They are now less forgiving. Everett Eisenstadt has noted that statutory authorities lack IEEPA's flexibility. They also lack its insulation. Every tariff now generates paperwork. For an administration that values speed, this is friction. For critics, it is accountability. Section 232, the surviving pillar. Among Trump's trade instruments, Section 232 remains the most potent. By invoking national security, it transforms commercial policy into strategic necessity. Steel and aluminum tariffs have already reshaped global markets. Vehicle levies loom. Lumber and other sectors may follow. Supporters argue that these measures protect critical industries. Critics see them as disguised protectionism. What matters politically is durability. Section 232 has survived judicial scrutiny. It offers continuity. As Nizak Nick Akhtar observes, the administration has already pivoted away from IEEPA. Section 232 is the new center of gravity. This is a narrower, more defensible form of nationalism. The business community's calculus, corporate America's relationship with Trump's trade policy is transactional. Firms dislike uncertainty more than tariffs. Predictable costs can be reduced. Legal chaos cannot. The current environment is maximally uncertain. Temporary tariffs, pending investigations, refunds, and legislative votes create a fog of risk. Investment decisions are being postponed. Supply chains are being diversified. Hedging has become strategic. Publicly, executives speak cautiously. Privately, frustration is mounting. The promise of reshoring has not matched the reality of compliance costs, global repercussions. Internationally, America's tariff turbulence undermines credibility. Partners hesitate to negotiate long-term arrangements when legal foundations are unstable. China has learned patience. Rather than confront Trump's threats directly, it waits for institutional obstacles to intervene. Europe responds with proceduralism of its own, preparing countermeasures within WTO frameworks. The era of dramatic bilateralism is giving way to calibrated resistance. Trump's disruption has trained others in endurance. The electoral economy, protectionism has always depended on selective perception. Its benefits are concentrated, its costs diffuse. Politicians highlight factories and ignore supermarkets, but inflation has sharpened perception. Voters now notice prices. Polling suggests that economic anxiety remains a decisive factor in swing districts. Tariffs, once abstract, are becoming tangible. Democrats are preparing to weaponize this. Every price increase can be traced, rhetorically, to presidential decree. Republicans are preparing defenses. None is convincing. The limits of nostalgia. Trump's trade rhetoric is nostalgic. It invokes an America of smokestacks and surplus. It promises restoration through restriction, but the economy has changed. Services dominate. Supply chains are global. Productivity depends on integration. Tariffs cannot recreate the past. They can only rearrange the present. The attempt to revive mid-century industrialism through 21st-century executive orders is anachronistic. History does not reverse on command. Litigation as policy. One unintended consequence of Trump's approach is the humidification of trade. Every major decision is contested. Courts have become arenas of economic governance. This favors actors with legal resources. Large firms navigate complexity, small ones struggle. Trade policy is becoming a matter for judges. This is neither efficient nor democratic. It is, however, inevitable in a system where executive ambition outpaces statutory clarity. The presidency rebalanced. The Supreme Court's intervention marks a subtle rebalancing of power. It does not prohibit tariffs. It restricts shortcuts. Presidents retain substantial authority. They no longer possess immediacy. For constitutionalists, this is progress. For populists, it is sabotage. For Trump, it is frustrating. Strategy without spectacle. Can Trump adapt? Possibly. His administration can coordinate investigations, cultivate congressional allies, and deploy Section 232 aggressively. This would produce a slower, quieter form of protectionism. Less theatrical. More bureaucratic. It would resemble traditional industrial policy more than populist warfare. Whether Trump finds this satisfying is uncertain. The ironic outcome. The irony is sharp. In seeking maximum control, Trump has provoked maximum constraint. By bypassing institutions, he has revitalized them. By politicizing trade, he has judicialized it. His attempt to dominate has strengthened the system's defenses. This is not defeat. It is limited. Conclusion. Power meets process. Trump's new trade agenda was designed as an assertion of sovereignty. It has become a lesson in governance. The Supreme Court has removed the shortcut. Congress is rediscovering caution. Businesses are demanding predictability. Voters are watching prices. Protectionism is no longer costless theatrics. It is an accountable policy. As the midterms approach, the president faces an uncomfortable truth. In America, even economic nationalism must pass through institutions. Even populism must respect procedure. Even strongmen must negotiate with calendars. Tariffs remain possible. Dominance does not, and in the quiet arithmetic of democracy, timing is still stronger than will.